you call the roll, please?
Sure. Carla Morano. Joan Mead.
Here.
Mary Comstock. Paul Swenson. Here. Diane Cervello.
Here.
Edward Torian. Here. Robert King.
Here.
Mary Cronin.
Here.
Peter, would you be so kind as to read the minutes, please?
The minutes from the last meeting, Monday, July 14th of 2008. There's a correction. The Commission had discussion and accepted with small revision the minutes from June 23rd of 2008. The Commission heard input from the public. Mr. Joel Uri spoke in favor of a separate planning and zoning commissions and in favor of 4-year terms if every elected official was going to have a 4-year term. Warren Levy spoke against combining the planning and zoning commissions. He spoke in favor of eliminating the city clerk's position. He also believes that the council needs a staff. He also submitted a letter which I circulated among the members. Gregory Marciano spoke in favor of an annual dollar cap on non-referendum bonding. Margaret Mitchell spoke about capital budget process and the need to overhaul the present way it's conducted. Elise Marciano spoke about the city clerk's position as being outdated and requiring a more specific job description and duties. Lynn Waller spoke against combining the planning and zoning commissions as it would help neither the developers nor the neighbors. She was also in favor of retaining the city treasurer's office and in favor of eliminating the city clerk. Mr. Al Robinson spoke about, I believe he spoke about the statutory requirements for municipalities to publish legal notices in newspapers of the largest circulation, and he referred us to statutory sections of the Connecticut General Statutes. The Commission then had a discussion of the role of City Treasurer and voted on a motion to retain the office of City Treasurer 4-2. In favor were Mead, Comstock, Torian, Cervello, opposed Bezade, and Swenson. The Commission agreed to invite the present Council President to the next meeting. As an aside, Mr. King, I spoke to Mr. Cabo. He was unavailable to attend tonight's meeting. He told me he'd like to come to the first meeting in August.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Continuing on with the minutes, we had a discussion, we had input and the presence of Mayor Boughton. He spoke regarding the combining of planning and zoning commissions. He discussed that the plan of development recommended combining the commissions and the city council adopted the plan of development specifically with the provision that the planning and zoning commissions be combined. He discussed that the combination would make the process more efficient for developers and should lead to better and stronger zoning regulations. The mayor was also finally in favor of making both the combined planning and zoning commission elective. We, after discussion and after input from the mayor, voted to keep the zoning commission separate and the planning commission separate. And we voted on that motion, and that motion was to combine the planning and zoning commissions. In favor of the motion, Bezade, Mead, and Swenson. Opposed were Torian, Comstock, Cervello, and Morano. Please make those changes.
Got it.
The Commission then had discussion with the mayor and among the members regarding the length of term of office for elected position. The mayor discussed the significance of a longer term for the implementation of long-term policies, programs, and projects that are necessary and important for Danbury going forward. He pointed out that in Danbury's history, the 2-year term of office, then the biannual election, and the ever-costly political campaigns created a political environment where long-term projects and decisions were easily avoided. Other issues, such as the learning curve for elected officials once they attain office, and then shortly afterward have to campaign and to keep the position, were also discussed. The Commission voted to retain the current 2-year terms of office by rejecting a motion to extend the term of office of elected officials from 4 years to 4 years from 2. That motion was rejected 4-2. In favor of the motion, this is in favor of the 4-year term, Mead and Cervello. Opposed, Bezade, Swenson, Turian, and Comstock. The commission then unanimously voted to discuss the non-referendum bonding proposals by the mayor. He was submitted those. I think those were circulated to everybody.
Thank you.
The commission had input and discussion with the mayor regarding his bonding proposal and the changes he would make to sections 7-10, 7-5, and 7-3E of the city charter. The commission agreed to discuss at the next meeting the preamble and a proposal to add language requiring a periodic review of the charter, as well as language regarding charter section 6-9. With some changes, those are the minutes.
Are there any other changes? None. Therefore, we'll accept the minutes as read. Peter, thank you very much for preparing these. I know it's a pain in the neck job, but your efforts are greatly appreciated. Welcome to the public. If anybody would care to address the commission, we would be so pleased.
My name is Reed Mitchell. My family owns several pieces of property in Danbury. I feel like I know you because I watched you on the TV for 4 or 5 sessions or something while we were out of town the first when you got started. One of the things I've noticed is that we're suffering from one of the particular institutions in New England. And that particular institution happens to be the town meeting. And a lot of people who are native to this area look around and see that the adjoining towns still are running referendums or votes on the budget itself, never mind bonding issues. So there's a lot of feeling that the citizens, even though we have a representative form of government, we want to have input to the financial aspects of the government. Now, personally, I grew up in a town, in a city where we had a city manager and a city council, which was nonpartisan. So one of the things I notice here is we have a strong mayor who's elected and a council that's partisan. If you were to go back over and look at the votes over the years...
Mr. Mitchell, excuse me for a minute. Okay, sorry.
If you look at the votes over the years, most of the time when there's a division in votes, they run along the party lines. Because the parties try to get everybody in their party to vote alike. They aren't always successful, but in general, that's what happens. Okay, so I watched last session when the mayor came in and apparently answering to public outcry, or at least outcry before you guys, that people wanted a cap on the amount of bonding that did not have to go to referendum. So the first thing he did is he offered a yearly cap on the bonding that didn't need to go to referendum. The second thing he offered was a cleanup in the language, which probably was necessary to understand if and when we ever have to execute an emergency funding of something. But the third thing was really counteracting what the first one was, to cap the annual bonding that does not need to go to referendum. He suggested a priority list, and he gave out a figure of 10%, which he said was $20 million, which is, of course, really $30 million worth of stuff, that if it's on the priority list and is okayed by the staff which he appoints, and the Planning Commission which he appoints, then it needs 2/3 vote of the Common Council. Well, in a partisan setup, the council often votes, most of the time, votes along party lines. So most of the time I've been in town since 1986, the council has been dominated by a single party that is the same as the mayor's. So once the mayor suggests something like that, my feeling is it will go through. Okay, the council very rarely bucks the mayor. Okay, end of that topic. Okay. Again, reflecting on my background, the mayor here, when I first came here, everybody said, if you want something done, go to the mayor's office. And I thought, well, why do you go to the mayor's office? You got all this other, you got city staff, you got this and that. Well, the mayor is very powerful, okay? Everybody thinks that their council people have something to say. They do. But if you want something done, you go to the mayor's office. So if you think that the council needs more strength, one of the things I could suggest to you is that the mayor not chair the council meetings. Chairing a meeting where it's political gives the person in charge a lot of leeway to maneuver things. So I was glad to see that you at least initially rejected the 4-year terms, because people so easily get reelected that if there is a learning curve whenever you take on a job, whether it be an administrative job or a legislative job, there is a learning curve. But people get so easily reelected that I don't think it's a sacrifice to have them run every 2 years. Very rarely does somebody get defeated. Occasionally, you get a big a big change, seat change, and you get a new mayor and you get a whole bunch of new council people. But in general, people get reelected year after year. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Any questions? Thank you, sir. Any other? Lynn?
Didn't have a lot of time to write things. Had a really busy week with a neighbor. One of the things that I question is with the mayor's presentation last time on capital improvements, when he talked about 10% of the estimated cost of all projects contained in the capital program. That's $30 million. That's a lot of money. And it scares the pants off of me, who can't afford to live here in this town now. If we start doing that on an annual basis, we're going to be well behind the 8 ball. He kind of offhandedly said, well, you could bring it down to 5% instead of 10, but that's 16 to 17 million per year with no approval by the public. This is under the part that is the part of the capital budget that he suggested that we try to work into the bonding each year, and I'm just concerned about the quantity of money. I also wasn't sure whether the high priority list would come from the Planning Commission or the Planning Department. I have the feeling it should come from the Planning Commission. The other thing I was disappointed to hear you all say, and granted it was after I had left, I have such trouble with my legs, I leave early, that you did not plan to take up or don't expect to take up the number of signatures needed on a petition for a referendum. I think you all feel that only time that people will use the ability of a referendum is for the budget. I believe you can referend ordinances or other things that the government does if you're really bothered by it. There's no sense to referend the budget, because I believe that if we were lucky enough to get all of the signatures and went to referendum and voted down the mayor's budget, it just automatically goes back to his budget of April 7th. So we accomplished nothing. I don't know if it's in a state statute or if it's in the charter, but that's what happens. So people are not going to be referending a budget because you accomplish nothing. But at the moment in the charter, it states that we need 15% of the registered voters to get a petition together to petition for any ordinances or anything like that. I called the registrar's office today, and there are 30,600 registered voters in the city of Danbury. That means 4,590 people would have to sign a petition, all registered, all accurate. So you really need 5,000 or more signatures within 30 days. I don't think any of you have ever tried to do that, but I did. And it's darn near impossible. Actually, it is impossible. It took me 6 months. I didn't know there was a 30-day cap on it. So it took me 6 months to get enough signatures. I find it discouraging, and I'm really discouraged that you're not even willing to talk about lowering it to 10% or 5% or something that's more doable for the general public if they want to. Some of the things that came up last year was the sex offender ordinance, the parade ordinance, and I don't think 287G was an ordinance, it was just a resolution. But all of these things might have been petitioned if the number was down reasonable enough that people, the public, could have a say. And it is our only means of having access to the government besides talking to an individual person. And just as Mr. Mitchell said, most of the councilmen vote with the mayor when they're on the side of the mayor. So it's very difficult to be heard. I think this is a method of closing out the public, as all of these methods of financing are closing out the public for the bonding, because if you allow access to $30 million, why would you ever have to go to referendum? Why would the public ever have a say in anything that goes on in the city other than electing a councilman? Thank you. Oh, one other thing. I know you're down to very few meetings. A lot of this stuff is really important. Maybe you should be meeting more often and try to have a few more meetings so that we can accomplish a little bit more of what's important here, because this really is the constitution of our city. Thank you.
That's something that we will address. Thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you, Lynn. Are there any other comments?
Al Robinson, 182 Osmore Street.
Welcome.
I don't know if this is the appropriate setting. I'll ask this question first. Is there any way I can find information pertaining to when you requested the city clerk to come and come before this commission? The date of that, the date of that request?
The date, I think there were several. Peter, can you?
I wouldn't know off the top of my head.
I think there were several
it might be in the
requests,
minutes.
Mr.
Provide some
Robinson.
contact information if I can get that from you at a later point in time.
Sure. It might be in the minutes. I don't know.
I think the first time she was scheduled to come, and she was ill and could not come. Another time she was requested to come, and there was a conflict of schedule. She did come a few weeks ago, and I recall, and it's just from recall, it was probably a week to 10 days in advance of her coming. So she did come the third time when requested.
Right. I'll address I don't have enough time in my presentation about the city clerk's position, why I feel that it should be eliminated and replaced with a civil service position. It will take way too much time. I think I'm going to present it in written form with a CD and bring that in the next meeting. I do feel that after hearing what the mayor said about the bonding, putting the cap on the bonding, I think it's even more important that there should just be a yearly cap on this bonding. If you want to make it 2.5, fine. I'm very happy with 500,000, but 2.5 is fine per year. Then it should be that way. Capital projects going in excess of tens of millions of dollars, and he has the ability to do that per year. It really scares me a lot. And I think personally we're just bonded enough in the city as it is. Also, the elected positions, I'm happy that it was kept at 2 years. Thinking of previous mayors, this present mayor right now, he's probably on his 4th term. Mayor Eriquez ran for 6 terms. Mr. Dyer went for multiple terms, so the 2-year argument just doesn't pass the smell test, because you have these once you're in office as an incumbent, it's very, very difficult to vote you out. Extremely difficult, unless you have an indictment or something. So that's all I have to say for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Robinson? Thank you. Anyone else wish to address the comment?
Can I take a second bite?
Just a moment, please, Mr. Mitchell. Warren?
No.
I'll allow you 2 minutes, please, but
Okay.
we need to move on.
This is a completely different topic. This is about the dissemination of information in the city. When the plan of conservation and development came up, you try and get a hold of a copy of it, you can't, okay? Nobody, you can check with the library or get somebody. If you're important, somebody may loan you a copy. But if you're the public and you want to take it home and read it, because it's a fairly lengthy document, it's very difficult. I suggested that the plan be amended to make somewhere in the plan there be a way to make information available. They didn't want to change the plan because they'd already written it, and it was in their head. Well, that's what goes on here. Once things are written and formed, and it's time for the public input, the public is really disregarded, because everybody's formed up the thing they want to happen, and if you come out of left field with something, so if you can squeak in different places to try to make it easy for the public to get copies of things, I'd appreciate that. You could ask this gentleman how many times my wife came down to his office and said she couldn't get something because some clerk didn't want to give it up. So thank you.
Thank you for your opinion, Mr. Mitchell. Moving on. As soon as I find my agenda. Thank you. I've got one here with me. Thanks for keeping me honest. Before we start, I just would like to share a thought for your consideration. The chairman is not here tonight. In effect, then, there is 2 votes that will be absent because I can only vote in case of a tie. I would ask you, out of consideration for those who are not here, mainly the chairman, that we defer any voting on any items on the agenda tonight. It is your pleasure. I will follow whatever you wish to do. Okay? The next thing on the agenda is the charter language on bonding. And I presume what we're referring to is the mayor's recommendation? Is that correct, Peter?
Yes.
That's correct. It's referring to specific sections of the charter. At the last meeting, the mayor provided us with 3 separate pieces of paper regarding proposals to resolve issues circulating regarding what I'm going to call non-referendum bonding. I think all of us in the room are well familiar with that term. So the mayor brought this up. I think we agreed at the last meeting to discuss this one more time.
Well, was this discussed at the last meeting?
The proposal was discussed only really by the mayor. It wasn't discussed among
ourselves. So what is our pleasure? We want to discuss this evening?
Do I want to discuss it this evening?
How about
We usually put it on the agenda.
Right. No, we would like to pick it up. Should we take it step by step? Section 7-3E, which seems to be the controversial piece. You want to start there, since it's the first numerical order? Has everybody read this document? Opinions? Discussion? There is no discussion?
This was a proposal, well, I'll discuss it. I mean, this was a proposal by the mayor, and I think his effort was to put financing over on a section in borrowing where it would normally come from the bonding section, rather than dissipate the account the city keeps in reserve. I think that in all of our meetings, there's been a consistent discussion about the need to cap what I'm going to call non-referendum bonding. This language is meant to provide in an emergency a means of borrowing money.
You're on 7.5 then?
I'm on 7.5.
Okay. I thought we were on 7.3. 7.5 is fine. No, go 7.5. We're on it. I just flipped the page. Continue.
And I think that it's going to run into the same issue in terms of getting it passed through the council and getting it approved by the voters at the next election. This is a big change.
Right now, I think we should address the pros and cons of the recommendation as opposed to what the voters may or may not do. That's pure speculation on our part, Peter. I suspect you, with your knowledge of these things, are correct. The pros and cons of this, the one thing that I had a question about is that on 3-12, I believe it is, deals with emergency ordinances, and that there is a time limit on emergency ordinances of 65 days. Excuse me, I gotta put my cheaters on, 61 days. Is that correct, Rick? And how does that impact this, or am I reading something wrong?
This is appropriation, that's an ordinance.
Well, ordinances follow appropriations. You can't spend it unless there's an ordinance, if I'm correct, right?
Well, ordinances may involve borrowing or funding, and they may not.
Right.
And I would say to you that 7-5 perhaps overlaps 3-12 to some extent, but they aren't entirely redundant. So if you're talking about borrowings in order to meet an emergency, that will throw you into 7-5.
Okay, but could you clarify this 61-day phrase in 3-12 for me then? I'm just having a difficult time understanding that, Rick.
Well, we have never used 3-12, my memory, in 30 years. But my guess is that within the intervening 61 days, there's an expectation that you will go through the traditional required steps in order to adopt an ordinance. But this is meant as a stopgap measure.
Okay, then under 7.5, an administration can fund emergency things. Wouldn't that require an ordinance, though?
If you're borrowing, it does, yes.
Right. What if it were to come from the unrestricted fund?
If it comes from fund balance, it doesn't require an ordinance.
Okay.
It requires a resolution.
Is that what this is getting at, then? It would come from...
7.5?
Right.
7.5, the language, look, if you take a look at the strikeout in 7.5, you'll see some language that was troublesome, at least to some people. And the troublesome language talks about the absence of sufficient general fund revenues to meet the appropriations.
Right.
Sufficient is a word that has some wiggle room in it. And while my personal opinion is that the absence of sufficient funds in the general fund to meet an appropriation doesn't necessarily mean you have to draw the general fund down to zero. The question is in doubt. Some people can read this language and say, you have to spend all of your money before you can invoke 7-5. That's, in my opinion, a crazy thing to do.
That wouldn't be wise financially.
It wouldn't
would
be
affect
wise
our bond
financially.
rating and everything else.
So
but
the purpose for the language that you see is, at least in part, to clarify what I think the original intention was, to make it absolutely clear that you don't have to spend yourself down to zero.
Right.
And that you don't have to go to a referendum in the case of a true emergency. If it was
Right.
truly an emergency, you don't have time to go to a referendum.
So then your other alternative is to finance it.
Correct.
And doesn't 3-12 talk about that?
Does 3-12 talk about financing?
I thought it
Does
did.
it talk about borrowing?
Well, I thought it referred to emergency measures, and with this, what is troubling me is this 61-day
Sure.
thing, Rick. I just flat don't understand it.
Well, that doesn't make any sense, does it, in the context of a borrowing? That's why we're thrown into 7-5.
I just find it confusing. Thank you. So this 7.5 would strictly be for emergencies. Are emergencies defined?
There's plenty of case law that will define an emergency for you, and it's not defined in this book, no.
Well, for example, just this week, the governor declared a bridge under emergency provision to avoid some paperwork and having to go out for authorization. So the bridge is not unsafe, it's just an expedient way to do repairs. Would this allow some aggressive mayor in the future to go out and declare emergencies if he wanted to do something that would be not really an emergency? I mean, how do you define it?
Doesn't the language say emergency threatening the lives, health, or property of citizens?
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, what about the health? Can a leaky roof on a school be declared an emergency?
Yes.
Should be. Yes.
So
Yes.
that can
What
be.
would the mayor do? The mayor would go to his corporation council, seek an opinion, then go to the common council and get two-thirds
All
vote.
due respect, that's speculation. We don't know what a future mayor would do. That's
Well,
what this
according to
mayor would do.
7-5, that's what he must do.
You have to.
Okay. I just find it a little cumbersome, but that's my point of view. That's all I have to say. Anybody else?
I guess I just feel a little bit constrained not being able to vote on, so that's why I feel that
No,
having the
no,
discussion is...
if the commissioners wish to vote on these, that's your pleasure. I will, well, as I'm suggesting, because the chairman is not here, that under respect for him, that we delay it. But that's my point of view. We have other people at this table that may have a different point of view. If you want to make a motion to accept or reject, feel free.
Can I go back, with your permission,
Sure.
to a question that you raised? What is an emergency? We are going to be choosing words for the next 6 months. Words have different interpretations. They have shadings. They have differences. Some are meaningful and some are not. At some point, you're going to have to rely on words to convey meaning. Emergency conveys a meaning. Can I guarantee to you that there won't be a mayor who will misuse the words that you've chosen? No, I cannot. But words are all you've got. Emergency is a word that has meaning. So if you find it vague, I challenge you to come up with a better word than emergency.
I'm not questioning your language, Rick. All as I'm saying
It's not my language. Yours
is
exists
it
anywhere.
is up to some interpretation, as is the current charter in dealing with borrowing, which I think you will agree. It's open to interpretation. And all as I was trying to do was to clarify this. Am I in favor of a mayor having the emergency authority to fix something that is dangerous in a city? Absolutely. As I believe everybody at this table is. My reason for questioning is, can we be specific as to what is an emergency? Now, these cover it, but in so voting, if you want to accept this language, there are some individuals, perhaps in the future, who could use this to their advantage of circumventing 7-10.
Yes.
All right?
We could add language. We could define emergency. But we would use the words to define it that are words that mayors will find if they go to their corporation councils or they go to a dictionary. And frankly, I'm not sure that even if you selected words to define emergency, that if we're going to imagine a mayor with ulterior motives or perhaps an excess of desire to spend city money, the mayor will find a way to get around the language that you've used to define an emergency. And then it will still be, as it is now, up to the Common Council to choose to vote to support it or not.
I didn't provide any words, Rick, so it's
I
not
know.
words
I
choose
can
to
bring
use.
back some words for you.
But all I'm looking at, Counselor, is something that is acceptable to the public and to the administration that allows the city to be maintained. Pure and simple. That's all I'm saying. I'm saying in so passing this, in my view, all right, this can be abused, and I think you'd have to agree.
And I'm just saying that no matter what words you use, the
I
potential
couldn't
for
agree
abuse
more.
is always going to be there.
But-
And further, what I'm trying to tell you is that emergency, this word, emergency, has special meaning. It's perhaps one of the less vague words that you're going to come across to describe this situation. It's an unforeseen event that has consequences for life, safety, and health, and welfare of the community.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Comments? Ed?
On
Mary?
any of the 3 sections, or is this one section?
If we can wrap up, are we through with 7.5? We'll go. Or unless you want to propose a motion on this, or do you want to deal with the whole package? Thoughts? Paul?
7 actually, on one issue, I don't think we need to take all 3 as a whole. I think they can be separated in terms of
Absolutely.
voting, as far as I'm concerned.
I agree.
Although they were introduced to us together as part of a program, and the Section 7-5 emergency appropriations, as I understand it, in an emergency, which I think is clearly defined, the council and the mayor together can vote to appropriate as may be necessary. And then the question became, what happens if there was not money in the budget to appropriate? Then what are they going to do? And the crossed out language was the direction that both the mayor and the council had. I think it makes it clear. I think the change makes it clear as to what the council can do, and gives them a basis or foundations upon which to act. Otherwise, in the absence of sufficient general funds, what does that mean? I mean, we could come up with 10 people come up with 10 different answers. I think this makes what happens in that situation absolutely clear, and I don't have any problems with what is an emergency or whether there's going to be an abuse of that condition. I don't see that as being an issue. I don't see it as ever been an issue in the past, nor at the risk of speculating, it seems in the future.
Okay.
So I have no problem with voting on this separately. Matter of fact, I'll make a motion that we approve.
Before you do, if I may, just one point, Paul. There are no limitations that can fall under this emergency provision.
I understand that.
It could be any dollar amount.
Yeah.
I'd make a motion that we approve the recommendation as proposed in the handout that receives entitled Emergency Appropriations.
Okay, there's a motion.
Second.
And seconded, that we accept the recommendation, the mayor's recommendation to change section 7-5. Those in favor, is there any, of the amendment?
Mr. Chairman, do we have some further discussion on that?
I was going to say, I can open the discussion, say,
Don't we vote to accept it and then hold a discussion?
No,
No?
discussion comes
Help me
first.
out, folks. I'm new at this job.
Motion, second, and then discuss.
Okay, thank you. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I think your concern on this is, and I don't mean to read your mind, is that there obviously is no limitation in terms of what could be, any amount, and what could be spent this way.
That's correct.
And I know that you're concerned with that. The fact that it applies to emergencies, and it applies to a part of our charter that I think has rarely been used, means it's something that hasn't really been well thought out, and it means it's something that I don't know how we can put necessarily a number on it. We could put a high number on it and probably be safe if we were going to put a cap on it. Or we could look to other numbers that we have used in section 7-10. But I can understand that, and we should talk about that.
I agree. Because this supersedes 710, if
Yes,
we
it
accept
does.
710. Thoughts? Pardon me?
You don't want to know.
Sure I want to know.
You're worried about a dollar amount, but in the revised version, it says financing to meet said appropriation shall be provided in such a manner. Shouldn't that give us the reference that it's to meet the need? Why would you, I mean, if it's an emergency, I think you have an option to set an amount. I mean, if the bridge collapsed or whatever, you need to repair the bridge. But how could you put an amount in an emergency, I guess is what I'm trying to conceive. Is there, I mean, would you do that? How could you do it?
There's ways of doing projects that you can do the emergency aspect of it and then go in for funding with other parts. But that's process. I don't want to talk about process. I want to talk about the concept of accepting this provision, which does not limit any administration in terms of its ability to go out and raise money under bonding or any other form with no limits under an emergency provision. That's what this does. If you're comfortable with that, then...
But it's talking about an emergency situation. And at some point, you've got to understand that we have elected these people because we trust that they're going to do the right thing and not run away with all sorts of money.
Okay.
And I think what this section does is clarify. It doesn't change much except clarify what is currently in the charter.
No, it changes it. I think
How?
it changes. This supersedes 7-10, the $2.5 million.
No, what I'm talking about is 7-5.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The language that's struck out really said the same thing, just in a more vague way.
Right.
So it's just clarifying it. It's not really changing it. Because we always did have in the absence of sufficient general funds, additional means of financing shall be provided in a manner consistent with the provisions of general statute. So we always had the ability to do it in an emergency, and this just clarifies how we do
How
it.
they do it.
Okay. Any other discussion? Do you want to vote on this now?
Well, we have to. There's a motion
We
on
have
the
to
floor.
vote now.
Well, I'm saying, is discussion finished?
Right.
Okay, let's vote. Those in favor of accepting the recommendation for change to 7-5, so signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? None. Passes unanimously. Seven dash, where do you want to go next? 7-3?
710A would be easier one to get out of the way.
Well, I think, yeah, it would be, but I think that 710 also refers back to 7-3, if I'm not mistaken. Discussion?
I'd like to start the discussion.
Go ahead.
One of the things that, the issues that came up that the chairman asked me to research was Councilman Levy had made a proposal regarding the capital budget and about the dates of submission. And I didn't understand fully understand his concept, but it piqued my interest, and so I asked that I meet with Councilman Levy, and I did. And what came from it was a discussion that involved, I think, the remaining two sections. And an idea, a very simple idea that he's proposed, and it's kind of won me over, and it's the idea that's won me over. It really has. I'm going to pass out what I would propose to be an alternative change to 7-3, just for purposes of discussion at this point, but I also think I want to get it into everyone's hands.
May I ask a question, Paul? Is this something that you prepared?
No, I'll explain. What's being passed out is a portion, there's extras too. A portion of the charter which is 7-3, which Councilman Levy had reproduced. And I think these have been passed out before to the commission.
Okay, this
And
is,
you've probably seen this before. And I'll try to make this as brief as possible, although it lends itself to a bit of education. At least it did for me. The operating budget, the Board of Education budget, the operating, what I'll call the operating budget, and the capital improvement budget. One of the reasons that we're talking about bonding is the capital budget and its lack of attention more than anything. And I think, Mr. Chairman, you've talked about that at length. Mm-hmm. And Councilman Levy has looked at this from a very simple point of view. The Board of Education presents its budget on February 15th. The council has presented the budget, the operating budget, on April 7th. The capital improvement budget comes out of the Planning Commission, and there's the date that, and help me, council, if I get this wrong. The council gets that at the same time it gets the operating budget.
correct.
And so there's no separate consideration. And more often than not, and I'm not talking about any single mayor, but in the past, administrations have used this more as a political tool. When I say this, I mean the capital budget as a political tool. So that it's a place to send projects to die, but yet you can go back to your constituents and say, you know, I put it on the capital budget, and it's there, and I've tried, and that's where it is, and it'll be considered. To the extent that the capital budget has been ignored, the simple change to 7-3 would be under E, if you look down, and no other changes to 3, would allow the Common Council and the mayor to address the capital improvement budget as it should be. As part, I know there was one of, Mrs. Mitchell has talked about in Colorado where they have a commission of civilians that get together and department heads and they all talk through. What Councilman Levy is proposing is that the mayor presents to the Common Council the capital improvement budget early on February 15th. That gives the council, the mayor, the planning commission, everyone the ability in terms of time to consider that budget in and of itself so that the proper attention can be given to that budget without the chaos of an overall operating budget. And so I think that's probably one of the reasons that the Board of Education budget was proposed early, so that not only that the mayor can look at it, that the council can look at it, but the public also gives the public some time to take a look at it. And so what the proposal is in 7-3E is that it be presented, the capital improvement program, I think it's called, be presented to the Common Council for adoption, additions, deletions, no later than February 15th. What does this do? It allows everyone to then look at the capital improvement budget at a time when, before it can be politicized, maybe, before someone can take and use it as they see fit. It gives it a time, it gives a spotlight to what needs to be done and not done, instead of it being the stepsister to the operating budget. And I think it's a very simple change. It's right on point. I think it moves the spotlight, it separates the spotlight so that capital improvement budget can be considered, so can the operating budget. And for me, it gave me the idea that, you know, maybe we don't have to worry as much about a cap. Maybe we don't have to worry because we're putting more, we don't know for the capital budget. Nobody's really sat down and looked at it. Since it's always been combined with the operating budget, I'm not as worried about either putting a cap in or leaving one off. It takes the focus away from trying to solve the problem with a Band-Aid of a cap or no cap. Is it 2.5 million? Is it 500,000? Is it 10%? Come up with these complex ideas and moves. Let's just consider the budget in and of itself. I don't think that's ever been done. So for me, that's a long-winded way of saying that I like this change better than any of the changes that I've seen, at least in what Mayor Boughton proposed. So I think that just got much too complex. And as much as I am a voice of flexibility, I want to empower these folks and give them the flexibility to get this job done. And this only helps them do their job better. So whether I think we've already voted on the cap, and we don't need to go back. But I think this then completes the puzzle. This completes the circle. This allows Common Council and the mayor and the citizens the ability to look at the capital improvement budget as it should be by itself, at least for a period of time.
Well summarized, Paul. You hit the nail right on the head. I think that's one of the major issues with the capital budget. And it may not be a surprise to you, but most corporations that I'm aware of follow that exact process. The capital budgets precede operating budgets, simply because there are a lot of expenses that are contained in a capital budget that have to be included in an operating budget. So that would work well. I think the lead time does exactly what you said, and that it gives more attention to a capital program in front of both the administration as well as the Common Council. I think it's a great idea. But are you suggesting that wording in replace of what the mayor's doing here with this 10%?
Yeah, basically I'm suggesting, you're right.
The process you're talking about.
Exactly. I don't see any need for considering the documents entitled borrowing or capital improvements to be addressed. We've already voted on the borrowing aspect of it. That combined with this, I think completes the circle. It gives the flexibility. I think history has demonstrated that the administrations in the past have addressed borrowing in a very judicious manner, and I think they'll continue. And I think to the extent that our citizens have any problems, they have their wards, their elected officials from their wards to talk to. And to the extent that there's not enough backbone there to, quote, stand up to the mayor, maybe I'm naive by thinking otherwise, but guess what? I mean, I don't think the charter can replace that type of human input. I think that's got to come from the individuals who've been elected or elected different ones. But we got to give them the flexibility to run this city, and I think this does both.
Other thoughts?
I don't know. I kind of like the idea of having the mayor and the public works director create a list of high priority items, which, capital improvements right now kind of just sits there. And I would like to see them prioritize items. So
While they do that now, I think there could be an improvement, and that kind of dovetails with what Paul's recommendation is what you're saying.
I agree with Paul that Common Council needs more time than what they're given now, and I think we should put in a longer time frame.
So we're thinking about changing the process, the capital budgeting process. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Mary, did you have a thought?
So, just confused.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah. So instead of all of this language, just this, what's underlined here.
Well, what I think would be
I'd like to see
appropriate is
some of both.
some sort of a write-up
The only
coming out
proposed
of
change
this
then
fall.
is
Instead of this on both these pages, right? We're talking about both of these together, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
The ones entitled capital improvement and borrowing.
okay. Just add this.
Correct.
7.3E.
Because we've already voted
Right.
on the other piece.
But I think
And
there's
that's the circle that I was
also, there's also processes that Joan is talking about. Might it be a good idea, Paul, since you spearheaded this, is to get together with a few folks and come up with the language that would address the process needs as well as the timing needs? Would that be something that would be logical?
I'm very reticent to go any further because I'm not a big micromanager. I don't think this document...
I don't think you're micromanaging, Paul. I think what we're trying to do is provide a framework for capital planning, which I think if you read now and look at the process, and I suggest that it probably would be helpful to have that outlined.
If it's this commission's will, I will be glad to do it.
Is it your will, sir?
I can only be challenged by motion. I'm more than willing to do it, but I think at this point, it's got to be the will of this commission for me to do it. Because my proposal is as it sits.
Well, I don't feel an urgency myself to vote on these, recommendations tonight. Maybe other people do. I think it would be better to take some time and get it right, is all I'm suggesting.
Yeah.
I have to remind you, though, that we are on schedule, and we were reminded at the last meeting that we are behind schedule.
Well,
and, we should
I appreciate that concern, but, there's a lot of weeks between now and when do we have to submit the report to
Draft report by end of the year.
The end of this year to the Common Council.
Yes.
Now, we get
With a
feedback
public
from the
hearing.
Common Council, right? We get feedback from the Common Council if they want to either accept or change.
Or provide recommendations.
So that's not built into the 16-month timetable. The public hearing comes before or after the final submission.
You must have a public hearing after preparing, but before submitting the draft report to the
Okay.
county.
So we could have that report, or that meeting in December.
Yes.
Okay. To look at the changes that we've made thus far, and when this is drafted, and I'm sorry I wasn't here last week, so thank you for bringing this up. Who will be writing the changes, Rick? Will that be you, or will it be the commissioners?
I don't know. That's something that you're going to have to decide. I was wondering myself how this would come out. If my first thought was that I would write it and you would approve it, but frankly, I've been preparing the amendments as we've gone along.
Correct.
So I think any one of you will be in a position when that time comes to write.
Or with cooperation of you, we could do that. It's really the chairman's call.
The
what he wants
commission
to do.
will vote
Okay.
on how this goes, and I would not presume to guess what your decision will be.
That's probably a fair statement. Thank you, sir. I feel if you look at the important issues that we have to tackle, Mary, that this is one of the important ones. We have spent hours on this. I think it's imperative that we get it right. That's from my perspective. So, Paul, if you want to take this on to come up with, maybe you and Joan get together and work on some processing.
The problem is, I think something else should be in there from here, and he doesn't think anything should be in there.
Okay.
Where do you want to go from here? Help me.
Joe,
So-
what do you think should be in there?
How would we change? And again,
The whole
it's a
thing.
conceptual thing. It's not.
I'm not sure how it would change the whole thing. I would definitely insert the time frame into this.
Into the document called capital improvement.
Right, I'd insert, present a program, and the language to the Common Council for adoption, additions, or deletions no later than, the February 15th date, that's when the Board of Ed is due. I think it probably could be around the same date.
I just had a question. Was there rationale or some kind of criteria for the April date?
It's just, I think in the charter, it contains all of the budgets for the city, is that to be submitted to the Common Council at once, and that's the school budget, the capital budget, and the operating budget. I think that's the requirement of the charter.
I think that's because the fiscal year
What we're
starts in
talking
July.
about
Right.
now is changing that.
Right, I agree, you should move it, but I also agree with her that we should do the other wording. I was just thinking, before you did any of that, was there any other rationale behind that April date? No?
I think that there is state statute backing that up, right, Rick? The submission to the budget.
Not that I
budget-
recall seeing.
Isn't there a state statute that says that the city must adopt a budget by May 14th or something like that?
May 15th, well, then
Not that I
I'll be-
recall
yeah.
seeing, but I haven't looked. I've
That's
always been
mentioned on
guided
the
by
other
this
side.
document that, I don't know, if you're asking whether or not we can tinker with the April 7th date,
That's basically my question.
yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
Certainly, you're not going to find a state statute that prevents you from moving it earlier. The question is, is there some kind of
Right.
drop dead date that's after April 7th? And I
Exactly.
don't know the answer to that question.
Okay. So we could move the capital budget earlier and still retain the April
Well, that was
7th
my
date.
only question, as long as you're moving it without breaking something.
Does anybody have any other questions about this, the estimated cost of the projects? I think what he's talking about here is the priority list.
Right.
The priority list can't be more than 10% of the entire capital budget. I think that's what he meant when this was put together, yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Which means he could go out and, the wording on this, Rick, refers to the current year and the 5 out years. If the combined capital budget over the 5-year strategic plan, if you will, pick a number, happened to be $500 million, does that say he could spend $50 million in the current year? Or would it only be 10% of the current year priority?
It's a good question, it's not clear.
No, it's not.
Because when you read that, it almost begs the question as to what the amount
It would
is.
have to be more specific on
Should
whether it was that year's.
All I can tell you is that in the conversation I had with the mayor, his goal was to try and create some language that would give a mayor and council the ability to borrow for high priority items without having to fall under the cap. Remember where we are is we have 2.5, but no annual cap. And he was appreciating the fact that there is pressure from the public to create an annual cap. And his answer to that was, that's fine, you can have an annual cap, provided that we have some mechanism for dealing with these high priority items. I don't think he cares if you modify this language to make it crystal clear in your mind about whether it's 10% or 2% or 1%, but I think that's his concern. What you do with that will be your conversation.
Can I just make a comment on that the whole concept of this? I think even if it is a high priority project, it should go to referendum if it's above a certain, because we're spending a lot of money, and I think this whole concept in 7-3E is not the way that I think that it should go. Because I think that if it is a high-ticket item project, it should go to a referendum.
You're right. As I read this, correct me if I'm wrong, as this stands, if we adopted this, some mayor in the future could conceivably go out and build a new police station for $50 million and not have to go to referendum. Is that correct?
I believe it's correct. I'm not sure that
I
was
think
the
that's the
mayor's
concern. I think that's the concern. If somehow we could, I think to your point, alter the language that specifies of the current year. The other thing would be of priority items. Who determines which projects are priority? Is that the common council or is that
No,
the mayor?
it says in
The
there.
mayor and the director of public works create a list, and that list has to be approved by 2/3 of the planning commission. That's how it gets created.
So the priorities are meet different review steps as it goes along.
Yes. And I think the ambiguity arises because of the two periods, this fiscal year and 5 fiscal years.
Which is usually
And that
the
was
capital
just
plan.
picked up without much thought, perhaps without enough thought on my part, from the preceding sentence.
Well, the 5-year capital plan is, that's appropriate. I think what is important is the current fiscal year, the amount of money that you're going to request funding for in that particular year.
Got it.
And I think, from my perspective, having looked at the capital program, I was concerned that a lot of the priority items were being pushed out to the out years. And they were bound by this magical $500,000 number, which, obviously would get us into trouble down the road. Okay. So.
I think I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
What I heard from the mayor last meeting was that it was his expectation that if the renovation or the new police building came up, that was the kind of project that would go to referendum. And so I'm answering you that yes, under this language, it looks as though, because we had this enormous capital list of capital programs, that maybe the math says that the new police building falls under that formula. But it certainly wasn't his intention. And
Sure it wasn't.
If there's some way that you can come up with some language that still yields high priority items, but doesn't capture as many or as big a number, then I think that satisfies the mayor. It speaks to his concern without giving away the store, if you will.
And I guess I feel that if it's high priority in the sense of an emergency, we have that covered in the other section. And if it's high priority in the sense of a project that we want to get done, then why not go to the public and see if they want to get it done, through a referendum?
Certainly, as we amended 7-10, it will have to go to referendum on a big project,
But,
above 2.5 million.
no, but Paul, again, I think this, if we accepted this wording in 7.3 now, that would supersede 7.10.
Oh, I understand that. I'm saying we don't need that language. I don't see a need for it. I think we've already dealt with it. Now, if we want to put an annual cap, that's a different question, I think, but
Well, you bring
why are we forcing, I don't see where we need, we can ask the mayor and the director of public works to come up with a list of high priority items, maybe so that the citizens will know, or maybe to alert the common council, but
in effect, it does give you a trigger point. As Rick is saying, if you take the current fiscal year and take the recommended percentage that 10% of the projects could flow, they could very well cap out annual spending without referendum to a smaller number than what 710 would provide under the current wording. Example, 10%, if the capital budget was $50 million, that would allow him to spend $5 million. Under 710, he can spend any amount he wants, as long as the project doesn't go over $2.5 million. A little confusing.
that's what, well, it's what Diane, I think I'm speaking to Diane's point, that it's something like, big projects should go to a referendum, and I think they will. As the way 710 has currently been amended by our vote. I think that's true.
That's right.
I hate to create for the mayor and for the director of public works. I don't want to force them into a situation where either spending or not spending. I don't see the need for any of that in this document. Let them decide what the process is.
I think how this came about, 7.3E came about because the mayor tried to
Right.
put an annual cap in 710. So then he came up with this as a way of putting in and out in case something came up that really needed to be done, and we were over 2.5 mil for the year. Our current vote stands with no yearly cap, so he could just go ahead and do it.
Well, no, if he wants to propose a budget, a project over 2.5 million,
Well,
then he has to go to referendum.
I don't think the
no,
wording
that's
under the
not what our
wording in
current
this
vote is.
would not do that.
That's what this one says.
Am I wrong?
No, I think you're right, Paul.
Right.
He's talking about a project.
Oh, okay, a project.
Yeah. So that he would have to address. Now, I don't know, I don't see the...
You're talking about
I'm not
a
saying I don't see it.
project,
I do
but
see it, but I think everything's in place.
The way I read this, Paul, is that he could take 10% of the current, if we choose to use that phrase, current fiscal year, 10% of those priorities, and submit a project in excess of 2.5 million
Yeah.
without going to referendum.
With this present language, yes.
Right?
Yes.
With the amended language.
With the
Right.
with his
With
proposed
his
language, that's
proposed
right.
language.
Yes,
I agree.
yes.
So,
And I don't see the need to make that change.
so with the current language, what we passed would be that as long as projects remain at 2.5 million or under, he could bond those. If it exceeds the $2.5 million figure, then and only then, per project, would he have to go to referendum. That's what we have. That's what we have now.
That's what we have.
and we're saying per project. Now, what he did this for was because there were so many people who wanted a
He wanted
2.5
a
cap, period.
Correct, Joe. He
On
wants a
all
trigger point.
projects.
That's what he's, and the bottom line is, the mayor is recommending a trigger point to go to referendum. Am I right?
I believe so.
A different trigger point. We already have one.
Right. Well, the trigger point per project, what he is looking for is an annual trigger point, if you will, Paul, of some dollar amount, okay, that would prevent a future administration from going out and conceivably building a new building and not having to go to referendum. I don't, it's not likely to occur, but you just have to recognize the ability to get there with this kind of language to exist. And if this is not comfortable language, then I think we need to work on the language is all. The idea, I think, is a sound idea, what the mayor is proposing, to try to put a trigger point over what we have done, but to provide him flexibility and future administrations the flexibility to maintain the assets of the city. And that's what I think we all want to do. It only comes down to at what dollar amount. Thoughts over there, Peter? You look like you're in deep thought.
I just don't, that you've seen the capital budget, and because
Right.
you've seen it, you shared it with me a little bit, and I looked at it, and that's just a number that's just not a real number in a sense, in terms of, there's a lot of things on there that are just there. I don't know where they came from or emanated. So, we're back to the trigger number idea on how to figure this out, and your original proposal is just as much merit as your personal proposal as this does in that aspect. I think this, we're tending down to make this more complicated than we need to do. I like the proposal of making a separate day to present a capital budget to the city council. It forces everybody to look at it and prepare. It's out there. I think when something's disseminated to the council, it's another way of saying it has to be made public to everybody. And that gives the public a chance, if they're interested, to find out about it and have a little bit of input. I'm reluctant to really get involved with the mayor's proposal for 738. I'm sort of happy with we passed the emergency section. That's a lot of leeway. We can all think of potentials where somebody could drive a truck through it. I'm comfortable with it. in terms of the language of emergency. I like what we've done to 710, and I think we can pretty much be done with bonding. If we adopt the language Paul proposed to 7.3.
So your suggestion is to just accelerate the date.
The date.
It's due to, what about the process that Joan is referred to on
The process
changes?
The process changes that they have to, the city, the political leaders of our city are going to have to submit a capital budget on a date there by itself. You know, it's not hidden with the regular budget. So they're going to have to come and present that. And they're going to figure out that process, not us.
That's fair. Any other discussion?
So can you just clarify this now?
I will
Then
try.
are we going to eliminate 7-3E altogether? We're not even going to discuss
No.
it?
No.
No, it's in there already.
Discussion right now is there's a feeling that what Peter is saying, and in fact, Peter and Paul, I never thought about this.
Peter, Paul, James in here now.
Peter and Paul.
Where's Luke? Is Luke?
James.
Bring the candy bars with you the next time.
Peter and Paul just confused the whole thing. If you get James, maybe we can do something.
Well, I think the suggestion coming out by Paul makes a lot of sense in terms of accelerating the capital budget process. From that flows perhaps a better process, because more people will be involved in it, having more time to fly under the microscope of the Common Council. It will get more attention, which is, I think, one of the objectives objections that we had in the past, that it was not getting sufficient review. That said, along with the emergency provision, would feel there's no need to make any other changes to 7.3, which provides for a, quote, form of a trigger point to go to referendum. So the referendum trigger point would be any project over $2.5 million that does not fall under the emergency provision. Simply stated. Is that?
I understand, but the only thing I don't...
God, I didn't realize I said that.
Don't try to repeat it, because you're trying to remember. So then from that, then you're telling us then with the emergency piece and the other part, there's no need then for a list of high priority projects.
That's the discussion. I'm not telling you there isn't. I'm saying the opinion between Peter and Paul is that by accelerating the process and combining that with the emergency provisions, they feel there is no need for this.
Then there's no need for, if you do all that, there's no need for a list of priority projects.
Well, that would fall in part of the process of the capital budgeting process, which is separate from the funding process. Yes, there is a need to identify priorities in the capital budget. If you look at almost any capital budget of any corporation, there's classifications, priorities, and impact statements with each project, which I think would be very helpful as we go through this. But
But
that's
the way that it's currently written, it actually says capital projects for the ensuing fiscal year and for the 5 fiscal years thereafter. So if you have to propose projects for the ensuing year, you would put the more high priority ones, sooner. So
one would think that would be the case, correct?
So I think that if we leave the language the way it is, the process will make them prioritize things.
Well, the only change that I think, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you're recommending is this change on accelerating the submission of the capital plan to the Common Council. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly, because I think that will force the mayor, the planning commission, everyone involved in the capital improvement program to, it in of itself is going to be prioritized. It's going to have to be.
Right.
Partly to the language that Diane talked about, but in and of itself, it's going to be prioritized. And it's going to bring some attention to it. And let those who run the city decide what kind of attention is going to be brought to it. I want to limit the amount of politicization. I don't want politics as much to be played with this budget, and I think that's what it will do. It keeps it simple. There's still a trigger point of 2.5 million. I think otherwise what we're doing is complicating things much too complex, and I don't think we need that. I think we need, we need the priorities, and we need to focus on the capital budget at the time it deserves it. And by moving it up, I think it does that. To ask them to go any further, I think that's up to them to decide. That's why they're there. That's why they've been elected. That's why they get the big bucks. It's up to them. And I don't think this document should set forth anything more than that. Give them their ability, give them the powers, and make sure it's reasonably given out. And I think that's what this does, certainly with the changes to emergency provisions. I think it's a complete circle, and it works well in a very simple form. Citizens who want to either attack or become part of it, it's very easy to get involved in.
What is your desire? Do you want to pursue this via a vote tonight, or do you want time to digest this information and think it over and put it on the agenda for next time?
I think we should draft a 7-3E section with just moving up the time period without adding the proposals that the mayor has recommended, and vote on it at a future meeting.
You have it in your hands tonight.
That's what it is.
What Councilman Levy put together,
That's this?
that's exactly that.
That's this.
Just that paragraph E. and
That is
not
the only change. That is the only change.
That phrase.
That phrase. I'm looking now at the top of the page is Chapter 7, Finance and Taxation, and I'm moving down to Section 7-3, Duties of the Mayor on the Budget, and I look at subsection E. As part of the budget, the mayor shall present a program, and then this is the change, to the Common Council for adoption, additions or deletions, no later than February 15th, that has been, and it ends there. Those are the words of change. Everything else remains the same.
Not to nitpick on this, Paul, but I think as part of the budget refers to the annual budget that is submitted to the Common Council. So some language change would have to take place. This is not part of the budget. What would be the capital plan would precede the operating budget of the city, and then, once it's passed, be folded into the operating budget. So in effect, it would come before the Common Council early for its pre-approval, if you will, and then, after the changes are made, would be folded into the operating budget. So I think it would be a two-step project, which again is not unusual.
I'm not seeing this here. I think it's part of the budget.
You want the whole budget?
It is part of the budget.
You want the whole budget in by the 15th of February?
No.
As
part of the budget,
well,
then the capital is the capital improvement program. Just part of the budget, that's all. And all I'm doing is saying, instead of giving to on April 7th, that part of the budget is going to come on February 15th. That's all. That is it. It's very simple.
I think that's the way it would be interpreted.
Which way?
As
Only
Paul
as.
is indicating right now, I think.
As part of the overall budget, the capital budget would be due on February
As
5th.
soon as you put February 15th in there, it's going to be clear to everyone that that part goes in early.
right, the
Without any
capital
additional
budget
language.
goes first.
There's no other way to interpret it. You could add some language, but you feel that you would.
What's your pleasure, Paul?
I'll make the motion that we amend 7-3 subsection E by adding the language after the word program and before the word previously, the words to the Common Council for adoption, additions or deletions no later than February 15th, that has been.
Seconded? Seconded by Mary Constantine. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Raise hands.
Opposed? The ayes have it. It passes.
probably a bad time to bring this up. But were we changing the 2 and the 5? Was that just one of the typos?
It was a typo.
Did we do that earlier? You know the 2 and the 5 down at the bottom? Estimates of cost of such project between 2's forever instead of 5.
Moving along rapidly.
You know what, I don't care, I'm not talking about it again.
Let's talk about borrowing. The changes in here, do we have to refer to 7-3E? I don't think so. This is in 710, Paul. So subject to the provisions of section 7.5 and 7.3-E. Is that, excuse me, do I have the right one? Which one is this? Yes, 7.5 doesn't need to be in there, excuse me. 7E is the emergency. 7.5, we don't have to put 7.5 in this, right?
No, because you just,
Just 7.3E,
no.
which is the emergency provision.
No, 7.5 is the emergency, 7.3E was the...
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Got it.
you don't need 7.3E.
So subsection 7.3E we could scratch out. Okay, folks. Now, the $64,000 question is, in any fiscal year, is what the mayor is recommending. And we have debated this one back and forth a number of times. There seems to, go ahead, Rick. Thank you.
I don't know what the mayor would say to you at this point, but my sense was that when he proposed this change to 7-10, it was with the assumption that you would agree
7,
Some wiggle
to the
room.
others.
Right, some wiggle room.
So I'm not sure that if you told him you weren't going to go along with 7.3E, I'm not sure that he would be as enthusiastic about 7.10.
You mean the recommended change to 7?
Correct.
Should we ask him?
oh, we know that he won't.
How do you know? I'm not a mind reader.
No, because he did this. He said that perfectly clearly when he was here. He inserted the cap for a fiscal year along with the other changes that he recommended. If we put the cap in here to allow some room elsewhere for emergency situations, et cetera.
Well, he still has that. He still has that provision in emergency, we passed that. So those things, the only other thing is that it does not provide room above for priority items.
Mhm.
Where do we want to go? I can read your mind, Peter.
I told you.
Peter wants to stay with what we already voted on.
That's right. I think we're done with those.
Agreed.
I'm ready to move on. Unless somebody wants to make a motion, we can vote on it.
Discussion? How do you feel about it? But we have, the only thing that we need to change is adding wording about the section 7-5 to what we've already passed. Correct? We've already passed the 2.5.
Right. Do
I
you
think-
need a reference to 7.5 in there?
That's
I
the
don't think so.
emergency provision,
I think.
which refers to 710.
One moment, please.
Yeah, the last line is pursuant to either sections 3-11 or 710.
Well, I think the correct interpretation of the charter, language in 7.10, as things stand now, I would argue that the correct interpretation is that 7-10 provides a general borrowing provision power, and that the emergency borrowing power is a narrower, more specific provision. The specific governs over the general. That's the general rule of statutory construction. The specific language does reference 7-10. So I think that the correct interpretation of this is that if you're in an emergency, you look to 7-5. 7-5 says you don't have to go through the referendum provision of 7-10. So I think as things stand now, it's clear without language in 7-10 that refers back to 7-5.
So no other action is required by this commission?
Correct.
Versus what we previously passed?
Unless you want to do something more. But as things stand now, it's clear.
What is the commissioner's pleasure? We don't have to vote.
Right.
Are you satisfied with things as they are? Ed?
I agree.
Okay, we're all satisfied with the $2.5 million project basis, which is what's going to be interpreted as, correct?
Yes.
I vote against it.
You can't.
Well, I just think there needs to be some trigger point, because one of the things that we're going to be looking at in this preamble is that, what? Would you read that statement? No, we'll get it in due time. Okay, moving on. Thank you, folks. Thank you for bearing with me. Item 3, change to 6-9. Peter, can you help me with this? Is this weren't we supposed to talk to the police commissioner or something about this?
It was added to the agenda by Carlo at the last meeting. And we were supposed to, I think somewhere we heard from the chief of police on this. At one point, there might have been a letter referring to the
I think
change.
initially there was part of the mayor's letter to us that the police
That's
chief
correct.
wanted to, I thought there was 2 changes he wanted to make. One was change in statutory language or something to update it, is that right, Rick? And the other one is
There's a letter
6-9, he wanted to eliminate the special force? Thank you. Peter, have you seen this letter? I don't know, that's the first time I saw it.
Then perhaps maybe we should just flip this item to the next agenda. I'll disseminate the letter to all the
Thank you.
commissioners. I thought everybody had
Okay,
this letter at
yeah.
some point.
Oh. All in favor of doing that, we'll just do it? Okay, we're going to move item 3 to the next meeting. Discussion of adding charter section requirement, periodic, okay, this is not covered in the current charter, as I recall, is it?
That's correct.
Is there a state statute
Sorry, which one?
about, this is item 4, Rick. Is there a state statute that requires a charter commission any time, or is that just,
No.
there is nothing? And there's nothing prohibiting it, if we want to make it whatever term we want.
There's language in 7-189 or something that says that while a charter revision commission is pending, deliberating, they can't be the petition. So that's the only description.
Okay.
There is, however, language in the charter that requires, for example, reapportionment every 10 years. So if you choose to do something like that, there is a model that I would refer to in drafting something here.
Okay.
In my review of other city charters, I did come across quite a few that did have a 10-year charter review provision.
Do any of them have a two-step review that would have a kind of an interim look, like on a 5-year period, for changes that would come down as a result of state statutes and changes in departments or stuff like that? You know, since this thing's got to be a little bit of a living, breathing document, I'm wondering if it wouldn't be appropriate to have, you know, like a short-term 5-year review, and then a longer, more extensive review at the end of every decade, or every 10 years, if you will. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I don't recall seeing that in any of the other charters.
Good, we can lead the way.
Was it mandatory?
There was a mandatory 10-year review in about 20% of the charters, I think, that I looked at.
Otherwise, when you run into something that's a problem, then you call a commission.
Well, we could handle that by saying at least every 10 years. And the term at least would take care of that, right? Yes. They could do it on a frequent basis, right? See, Peter, you are training me to be an attorney. What should we do, folks? Do we want to draft language, or do we want to put something in the charter regarding?
Rick, is the current language in 8-11 amendment of charter? This charter may be amended in the manner prescribed by law. Is that what gives us the authority? Now?
No.
No?
Well,
State statute.
if 8-11 didn't exist, state law would
It still give us.
Oh, yeah.
So this is as close to what we have, this language now.
I'm sorry,
So there's no reason for,
for 8-11,
yeah,
it doesn't add anything to the document.
gotcha.
So
Just drop it. No.
drop it as an issue?
Yeah.
It's easy to drop it. It's been dropped too often. I mean, a charter revision commission for the last few really never accomplished their efforts, never bore fruition. The question is it a good idea just to have it automatically? It at least forces the council and the mayor to have some other body draft something at any given time, whether they want to or not. I have no position on it. I thought about it, I can think about it two different ways and argue it both ways. There's a part of it that makes sense, and the other part is it is a cumbersome process, and it's not going to pass anyway if the council doesn't want it.
Well, why can't we, you're saying section 8-11 absolutely is pretty meaningless? Yes. So why can't we make that become, add language to that to make a 10-year mandatory revision there added to that? Now you're saying the charter can be amended in a manner prescribed by law, meaning state statute changes, et cetera, but we would require a 10-year look at the charter. Why can't we just use that?
You can. I would just suggest adding the words "at least."
Well, at least.
Sure.
Why can't we utilize that instead of something like this?
Do you want to work on wording, or is that sufficient to do what we want to do?
Well, I'm pretty clear about what the concept is. If the commission wants to move in that direction, I'll prepare some language for your next meeting.
We hear a motion?
There it is.
There it is. Second?
Second.
Those in favor of adding an amendment, adding under H-11, the words that a charter revision commission will be appointed at least every 10 years.
But the charter will be reviewed every 10 years.
Yeah.
Thank you.
At
Should be
least every-
reviewed, thank you. At least every 10 years.
You know,
Some discussion.
I'm sorry, when you say review, that's pretty vague. I mean, it's a chart, it should either be the Charter Revision Commissioner or anybody can
Well,
review the
reviewed
charter.
by a commission.
Appointed,
Yeah,
I may
No.
have misled you, I'm sorry. I simply meant that if it was the consensus of the commission that some language be drafted, I'm pretty clear on what you're driving at. Some of you may choose to vote against the concept when language is drafted, but I'm pretty clear what you want drafted. So if that's the direction, my recommendation to you would be have Guy Chalk draft something in the next 2 weeks, bring it back, you'll consider it, you'll amend the language as
Got it.
appropriate. and vote
now
on
how
it.
do I get out of this?
Get rid of your
We got to
motion.
vote on
You
it.
can
What
withdraw
you
your
can do
motion.
Is withdraw the
Is
motion.
withdraw the motion.
Withdraw the
Who makes the
motion.
Did you withdraw the motion?
No, emotion.
The motion?
Oh, emotions I can withdraw.
Right.
yes. No, I think you should give it to him.
Then you have to withdraw the motion that you
I
made.
have withdraw, okay.
Motion
Withdraw
withdrawn.
and wait a minute.
So we will entertain language.
Yeah, we have to entertain language first, again. I'll take that motion back, we entertain language
Yes.
by Sir
Thank you very much.
Gonchar.
Go ahead.
And the seconder should also withdraw the second.
Yes.
And, you know, just, if you all nod, that this is something you're
That's
interested
it.
in doing, I'll draft something.
Thank you.
Please, Fred.
Do
Get
it.
that now? And make it short.
And I'm putting a note here, it should be short,
Very.
very short.
Provision.
Discussion of preamble.
We had a jury duty thing. There had to be something on it like jury duty. Once you served, you didn't have to come back.
At least 2 decades.
Has to be like a jury duty.
You can always move to Bethel.
And it should
There you go.
You become chairman the next time, chairperson.
No, I'm out. It's like jury duty. Once you're on, that's it. You can't go back.
But jury duty's every 7 years, isn't it?
Boy, then.
Preamble.
I will be.
Just think of all
voting
the
that language in.
experience you have. It'd be well suited.
I will be.
Next item is the discussion of preamble. Did you have something that you wanted to hand out?
I thought I handed it out at the last meeting.
She did.
You did.
I wasn't here.
I didn't get, sorry.
There was the first one in May.
Yes.
Everybody got the first one, correct?
Right.
Do you have a next one, Mary?
Yes? I'm sorry?
It's the final version we have.
I don't know. I had a draft,
That's the
something
same one that I
emailed to
have.
me from our
Yes.
chairman, draft change.
This one.
Well,
Is this the most recent?
Mr. Chairman, I had a chance to review
That's
this.
the most recent one.
And I'd like to make a motion we adopt the preamble as drafted.
I did not bring up your.
Second.
Would you read it yet?
I just
Can we
did.
have such
The
discussion?
opportunity to read.
We have lots of discussion.
I'll second it for purposes of discussion.
Thank you, Jim, Peter, and Paul.
Are we checking the grammar too today?
Not Mary's. She's.
I wouldn't. No, I'm just
No.
You don't need to put on at the county.
You're talking yourself into a job, you know.
I'm serious. It's okay. County treasurer and state Connecticut. Get it out.
There'll be no conflict.
Yeah,
I'm after
she's-
treasurer.
Okay.
The only question, if I can have one question, in strong political leadership, it doesn't specify a who.
I never.
Who provides the strong political leadership?
From everybody.
What about a mayor? Isn't that the intent here?
Taking out the comma, I like it just the way it is. I really do.
You're taking
I
out the
trust-
comma
Now
after
you need another
Fairfield?
time
After
to have
comment.
officials.
Doctor's point is well taken.
Where
We're moving the column down. the line.
Fairfield to officials.
We haven't deleted it.
Just move it.
Could I point out to this distinguished commission one phrase in here? The right of every citizen to be part of the decision-making process.
That means you get to vote.
What about bonding?
You get to
What about
go to
referendums?
referendums on bonding, too.
You want to switch citizen to elected?
You're listing a bunch of junk in
No, I'm just
No.
saying, I'm being, a little facetious here,
there. I was
Peter.
just going to
that,
say, you're trying to be funny.
We're saying one thing and we're behaving in a different way, is all.
I think there's a number of decisions that are made by our elected officials, which you and I will never vote on. And one of them is going to be bond. It's going to be, that's not just the us that building it.
Well, I guess the only thing I don't feel comfortable with on that, Paul, is that there's a number of people who came before this commission to express a concern and a point of view of a need to do that. And I just, I just don't feel comfortable with what we've done, but what's done is done. I think we had a motion on the floor to accept this, is that right?
That's
And
correct.
second.
And it's seconded. Any other discussion, Bob?
Comments. Just move the comment.
We
Just
have-
fix the grammar.
So I move to amend my motion to reflect the deletion of a comma after the word Fairfield and before and in the first line, and the insertion
I
of...
don't think you need to do that in your motion.
No.
No, I think the language
Content.
just to be
How about you
cleaned up.
just say we accept the content, she'll fix it.
And just clean up the language,
There we
clean up the,
Clean up your act, Mayor.
Okay.
Clean up your act.
Is this it?
the
Yes,
principal
is
has
that-
passed the document. Is there any other discussion? Ed? Let's try your mind. All those in favor of accepting this as a preamble to the charter signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. It's accepted as is with the corrections.
And well done to the author.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mary, will you be adjusting the comments?
I will, yes, thank you.
You will? Because I've read each shoes and leaves, and it makes a difference.
The last item on the agenda is discussion of topics to be resolved, and frankly, I'm a little confused because some of my feedback was that this was done at the last meeting. Is that correct?
It was not.
That's this.
Right.
Okay.
It was not.
I think we can go through this pretty quick. The city clerk is still outstanding, that's a TBD. The treasurer's been resolved, right? Planning and zoning has been resolved, correct?
Correct.
Municipal elections have been resolved, correct?
Yes.
The organizational review, have you had a discussion on that?
I think that there's been some brief discussion that we really won't have time to do a thorough organizational review of the functions of each department, but just maybe a cursory review of changing department titles and stuff, maybe we'll have time to do, but not to really go into the organization of every department.
To share with the commissioners, there have been discussions in the executive committee at one time, early when we got started. And there was a couple of different alternatives we could pursue. From what I understand, and Peter, correct me if I'm wrong on this, that the mayor's charge to us was to take a look at, literally a thorough look at the departments. And I think among the executive committee, we felt that we were not qualified to do that. That if such a task was to be done, that should be done by a professional organization that has that as their skill. We would certainly entertain any recommendations by the individual departments or by the mayor in which to change the charter, and that would include titles and other things. So I think an in-depth review is not something that we should be looking at, both from a time point of view and from an expertise point of view.
There was a concept that was briefly discussed also, that all the detail on the different structures of the departments maybe be deleted if it's not required by state statute. It would just list the departments so that it could be handled at a different level rather than being a charter issue.
Absolutely. That's a good point. The the descriptions in the charter currently is almost like a job description in some cases. And that too had been discussed as a possibility of taking and just putting in broad responsibilities in the charter, and then having job descriptions and qualifications as part of a overall job description on file, approved by the mayor and by the common council, and have it on file in the personnel director's office. That's something that, you know, if we choose to do, we could do that, but recognize this is going to take a great deal of work to do it. I think it's worthwhile doing it because I think the charter, if the charter changes every 10 years, job responsibilities and everything are more fluid than that. They change more often. So we could go through this and do those changes, but would probably require more frequent meetings.
And by the changes, you mean just to delete stuff? You have to...
We could condense the job descriptions. But as we tried to do that one time, yours truly, for example, changing the civil preparedness office, and I was saying it's a $10,000 budget, why do we even need it? And I was well on the way to making a motion to eliminate department when somebody, correctly so, said, you do that and we're going to be not able to get grants. So we've got to be careful what we do. We've got to take the time to do it, you know, thoroughly if we wish to tackle that. So.
Well, it seems to me that we're not going to have enough time to do that level of review that's needed for it.
Peter?
You know, this is back up for us to discuss tonight, Bob, for us to pick when we want to talk about these issues going forward in terms of what dates we're going to do this, these items. So,
what dates or whether we're going to do them?
and that as well.
Right. So what's your pleasure? Do you want to put this on an agenda for a future meeting?
Well, I don't want to put all of them on the agenda.
No,
but
but I'm talking about
if we want
the
to organizational review, we can just pick a date. If we want to put it on
right.
for August 11th, if we can. August 11th is the date I intend, based on our last meeting, to invite Mr. Cavo, the president of the council, to come talk to us. So maybe we could dovetail into that a little bit.
Would be a good fit. What you mean with the city clerk? Is that what he's coming to talk about?
Yes.
Yes.
So that could fall under that organizational piece. So we'll just do that on August the 11th and then decide the scope of it?
Yes.
Okay. Is everybody in agreement? Police Department, Section 6-9.
We decided that's on item, that was part of this agenda. We
Right,
took it
and
over.
we're going to do that at the next meeting, so is that the 11th or the following?
The
meeting?
11th.
Okay. Other charter revisions to be considered.
Do you think it'd be too much to put number 1 on for August 11th? I think it's important, at least put on the 11th or thereafter. The referendum requirements.
611, which Ms. Waller addressed us.
Oh, that's the percentage from 15%?
That's important to me.
I think we probably got enough on the agenda for the 11th.
Yeah, maybe, right.
Let's do it for the, you know,
The following meeting.
okay. That would be,
25th?
yeah, but when are we starting to run into that? Are we running into a Labor Day weekend thing? Or not?
That is...
No, we have a meeting, okay. So we do that on the 25th?
The 25th.
Is that okay, Paul?
Sure, yeah, as long as it comes up on
Right.
the timings.
Okay. What about this item about penalties for violating the charter?
I don't think so.
I honestly
I
think
think we
that doesn't
said
really merit any
drop that.
discussion. We kicked it around the last meeting, and it's something that, you know, the way the charter is enforced, if people don't follow the charter, there are decisions that are made that way, votes that are taken that way are extra legal. They can be challenged in court, and the municipality would lose. So I honestly think that it doesn't even merit an agenda item for us to discuss that.
But I believe that the state still has the whipping post law in effect, right? Now, we could adopt the whipping post law if you so desire. No? Not a good idea? Okay. Everybody agree we're not gonna tackle this violating this penalties thing? I think this was a result of the public hearing, if I'm correct, right, Peter?
This is part of it, and this comes out of an officer.
Okay, so we're not going to take that out.
That's right. And some of these we've already done.
Same for the removal of elected officers. We cannot do that. Revised, we've done this capital budget timing, and the process we've decided is outside the scope of this commission.
That's correct.
Okay? So that's done. Favorable tax status in the charter. I understand this was a hot potato last week, and people decided they didn't want to do this. Is that true?
I think that we said that it wasn't appropriate for it to be in the charter.
That's correct.
Right.
Currently, the process for granting favorable tax status is what, Rick?
I'm still hoping, I was hoping that I would get a clue as to what road we're talking about by judging the conversation, but I have failed.
Still no.
Still nothing. Favorable tax status.
Tax
What?
breaks
We're
for
talking about
developers.
BRT.
We're talking about BRT.
That's it.
No, that's
Not necessarily BRT.
Or anybody
But
else
that was the
does that.
example.
That's in an ordinance.
And I think what it is, what the intention here, Rick, was that tax, incentives, if you will, are given to, usually to corporations coming into the city that would generate a favorable impact on the community, providing jobs, et cetera, et cetera. I think the concern came up when it was extended to residents who would acquire a condominium or an apartment or a house, that they would get a tax incentive to buying in a particular location in the community. I think some people viewed that different than an incentive that would benefit the overall community. And that's what it was put in on. Should that be extended?
Yeah, 12-65B, I believe, of the Connecticut General Statutes authorizes municipalities to grant tax assessment deferrals under certain circumstances. And what the city of Danbury has done is adopt an ordinance that describes those circumstances. So I don't view it as a charter issue.
Okay. So it's by ordinance, it's saying.
By ordinance, based on enabling state statutes.
If we chose to do it, we could make it a charter item.
Why?
It's just a question. All right?
I think I would tend to yield to a desire on the part of the Charter Revision Commission to do something unless I found an absolute prohibition, and I'm not aware of that.
Fair enough. So we could do it if we wanted to. Is there any interest in doing this?
No.
No, no, no,
No.
no. Moving on. This is the city indebtedness.